Now, a lot of people at my cricket club have been wondering why I prepare in such a particular way for club cricket. They see me do quite atypical things, and that's why I'm creating this video, to really explain what I do, but actually more importantly, why I do them. Now, I've played a little bit of first class cricket, I've played a few years of twos cricket, some associate nations cricket, and about 15 years of club cricket all around the country. And the reason I say that is I think at all of those levels that I've played, I actually don't see, a level of optimization that's comparable to anything you see in the US or even in the Olympics. So I feel like at every level in cricket, there are further scope for optimization. Now, when I was playing twos cricket, the coach there said to me, everybody can dominate at this level and the level above when they're in the zone, when they're, playing their plan A. Now, he was saying that actually, how often are you in the zone in a season? It's probably only a handful of times. Now, the best players that he sees are people that can find a way of scoring runs when they're not feeling their best, when they're dealing with their plan B or their plan C or their plan D. Now, do you have processes, protocols and systems in place in order to perform when you aren't feeling your best? And that was a bit of an aha moment for me, because I actually didn't have anything in place when I wasn't feeling my best. It was kind of just, oh, I'm not feeling my best. If I get some, I do. If I don't, I don't. Now, if I asked you what you were thinking about the last time you were in the zone, you'd probably say absolutely nothing. So it's actually about how can you prepare so diligently so there's nothing in the forefront or the back of your mind. And, we often joke that the dum-dums in cricket are the ones that can be the most successful because they've got nothing on their mind. Now, I wonder, is there some truth to that sentiment? Because actually, the more things that you have in your mind, the more clouded you are and the less emphasis you put on just looking at the ball. Now, the current batting coach of Somerset told me when I was about 16, if you go on to be a pro, you will actually spend your whole career managing pain. You'll have a niggle, you have a small injury, but it's about can you perform through that? Now, I feel like when you're playing and you have niggles, those niggles often come to the forefront of your mind. I can't play this shot, or I can't do this and I can't do that. And it's just one other thing making you not focus on the ball. Now, I've had pretty much every injury under the sun from playing cricket. I've had a knee replacement, I've had a shoulder replacement, multiple dislocated other shoulder, broken both thumbs, broken back, ruptured quad. I've had pretty much everything. Therefore, with my protocol systems and processes, a lot of it emphasizes injury prevention. Now, I've taken inspiration from Olympic coaches, Formula One, American sports, entrepreneurs, biohacking, longevity experts, absolutely everybody, in order to build a protocol that I think is best practice for a club cricketer looking to optimize their physical, mental performance, and also preventing injury. Now, this routine I feel like I've optimized over the last 6 years, and it's ever evolving, and I think it's now, I would consider best practice for club cricket. So you'd think my routine would actually start on the day of the game, but actually it starts 3 days out. Now, I used to play a 3-dayer and then play a 1-dayer, and then you'd have Friday off before club cricket where you might gym. Now, when you're traveling around, say you're driving to Somerset or Durham, you spend a lot of time sitting in the car. You're like in this, they call it like a kyphotic position where you're all slouched over, your hips are tight, and then you sit watching the game in a slouched position, you sleep on your side, you're batting, all in this sort of slouched position. So I thought, okay, if we're doing a lot of anterior work, which is the front of the body, what you want to be doing is getting a level of external rotation like that. So I thought, okay, you should do back. Now, not understanding that the lat, the big muscle in the back, actually inserts onto the top of the humerus. Now, when you do the head of the humerus, so actually, when you do back stuff, you end up more internally rotated, and then you struggle to get sort of extension at the shoulder, and you end up compensating, and that's how I ended up with a lot of shoulder injuries. So I therefore don't gym too close to a game, because actually, no matter what you're doing, I feel like generally you're putting yourself in a bad position. If you do legs, you're going to tighten up at the hips. If you do chest, you're obviously going to end up with the rounded shoulders, same with the back. But you're not going to not gym during the season. Now, personally, I don't recover that quickly, so even 3 days isn't enough. But it's better than nothing. So I don't gym Wednesday, Thursday, Friday before a game. Now, the day before a game, the first thing I'll do is wake up and check my sleep scores. I've got an ultra-human ring. I had an Aura ring. And what I'll do is, if I haven't slept well, I'll take a mid-morning nap. And I try not to have any caffeine, so it allows me to do that. And I start work at 2 anyway, so actually, that will help me if my sleep isn't brilliant. The second thing I do after waking up is I take creatine. I actually take it every single day. Because of my weight, I probably take about 6.5 grams. You don't need to cycle on or off of it. You don't need a loading phase. It's got great neuroprotective benefits, cardiovascular benefits. I find it helps with performance as well. So that's the first thing that I do after I wake up. And then generally on a Friday, I'll try and avoid sitting as much as possible, because I find that when I sit, my hips get super tight, which puts me in that lumbar lordosis, which is sort of that position, and then I end up slouching like that. So I'll avoid sitting as much as possible. Now, when I work in the afternoon, what I'll do is I'll stand at my standing desk, and what I'll do is when I'm standing, I'll be rolling my feet with one of these, and then when I get tired of that, I'll transition into the stool that I'm sitting on. So this is the stool, and what that allows me to do is sit a lot more upright when I am working away. Now, when I get tired of that, I will transition into a normal chair, and every hour or so, I will put this sort of stretching pad on the ground, and I will stretch my hips and my glutes. If I'm doing all of those things consistently throughout the day, I find that I really have a lot better posture, and I find that, you know, I pick up a lot less niggles. What I will also do is try and do a lot of walking during the day. Now, I will also do in the morning some developmental stretching. That being said, I don't want to do too much because it can create micro tears. Now, yes, it's highly unlikely, but those micro tears can turn into bigger tears if you do them too close to the game. So what I'll do is mobility in the evening. I'll use floss bands, which is what a lot of Olympic weightlifters are doing, especially over in the US. A lot of pro sports are doing in the US. I don't see many people doing it in the UK, but I personally find it makes a meaningful change to soft tissue, especially around a joint, you know, around the hips, around the elbows, around the wrists, around the ankles. So that for me is best practice the night before a game. An hour before I go to sleep, I stop looking at screens and I put these on. Now these are orange lens blue light blockers. And I have seen in the data from the sleep ring that these make a meaningful difference to sleep efficiency and deep sleep. Now, I don't think that clear lensed ones actually work. The reason why I think these work is it makes the room a lot darker, so I get a lot sleepier. And also when you do look at screens, it makes it really boring. Go on social media and use the black and white filter. Social media becomes extremely boring. So I think the lack of stimulation and the lack of dopamine being released at the wrong times, because I'm wearing these, makes a really big difference for me in the data. Now, what I'll also do is turn my air conditioning on to 18 degrees about an hour before I go to sleep, and then I've got an infrared sauna, I'll go in the infrared sauna. Now, with the infrared sauna, I feel like, again, I end up with a bit of lower back pain, I end up with a bit of hip pain. That really goes away when I use the sauna, and then before I go to sleep, I use a Theragun on my lower back, my anterior tibialis, which is like the muscle next to the shin bone, and the bottom of my feet. Now, do I think a Theragun makes meaningful soft tissue change? No, I don't, because the next day you're probably feeling how you were before you used it. But I feel like it does promote a little bit of blood flow, it does remove a little bit of stiffness, and it actually does make me sleep better. So it sort of puts me into more of a parasympathetic state, I'm more relaxed, and again, in the sleep data, I feel like it definitely works. Now, again, to have one less thing on my mind overnight, I try and pack my bag and I get meal preps and I freeze my meals and they're ready to go into my bag in the morning, so I don't have to worry about also putting ice packs with it when I go and not putting food in the fridge when I get to the ground or anything like that. Now, on the morning of the game, again, I'll check my sleep scores. If I don't feel great or my sleep scores aren't great, I'll do something called NSDR, which is non-sleep deep rest. Now, NSDR restores acetylcholine and allows neurotransmitters and hormones to rebalance. It also increases levels of GABA and serotonin as well, so it only takes about 15 minutes to do, and I find that after you do it, you generally feel like you've slept an hour or two longer, so that's actually really meaningful. Now, during the first 90 minutes of waking up, cortisol is being released, and everybody assumes cortisol is bad. But actually, it's only bad if you're having it spikes throughout the day. It's there to serve a purpose, and that purpose is to wake you up in the morning. So by taking caffeine in the first 90 minutes of waking up, it's actually going to have a very minimal effect because the cortisol is already working to wake you up. Now, I would only use caffeine if you really needed it and use it as a tool to help prevent the buildup of adenosine later in the day. Now, another reason not to take caffeine is I feel like it can lead to a state of heightened arousal. And again, that throughout the day can lead to a little bit more mental fatigue, especially when you get to 6 p.m., 7 p.m., you're going to start feeling a little bit more lethargic than you would normally do. Now, a lot of people will reach for coffee or caffeine habitually, but if that's not the case and you feel like you really need something, it's often because you want the sugar that's sometimes associated with the caffeine, like in a Red Bull. I would argue that your best bet is to eat first and then see how you feel. If that doesn't work, then do the NSDR. If that doesn't work, when you drive to the game, have the windows down and get direct sunlight into your eyes. If you really want to take yourself out of a resting default state, you could use caffeine what I would maybe do is use 80 milligrams of caffeine, but I would also take it with theanine. So theanine promotes alpha brainwave activity, is a bit of an anti-anxiolytic, and should provide more of a sustained energy release. Now, I would probably take 2-to-1 theanine to caffeine. I saw a few years ago in the Journal of Psychopharmacology that caffeine increased anxiety, which we all know, but also decreased performance in cognitive tasks. It also adds a level of physiological and psychological stress, and in my anecdotal evidence, I found that it does make me, more impulsive, and that's not necessarily a good thing as a batter. Now again, what I would do before I leave the house is I'd do the mobility. I wouldn't do the developmental stretching. Again, I would just use the floss bands. I'd use it on the hips, I'd use it on the ankles, the elbows and the wrists. And then I'd probably do some activation on hamstrings and glutes, generally to get me into a much better position. Now, if you're going to be super nerdy and you want to be extra uncool like me, you can wear individual toe socks. There is an argument to be made that it might improve ankle mobility, it might help with proprioception, and especially if you are wearing trainers and spikes with a heel on it, it could prevent injury by 0.1% or 0.2%. But if you wanted to go all out, that is something that I would look to include, but bear in mind you will get a lot of abuse for it. The second most controversial thing I'll say behind the toe socks is I don't look at any screens or listen to music before a game. Now, at the ripe old age of 32, the eyes start to go, so I try not to get sort of eye fatigue by looking at screens and focusing on things too much. And equally with music, I find that, some people attach emotion to music and it can lead to over-arousal. So if you really wanted to listen to music, you could listen to something quite relaxing with the BPM around what your heart rate is or lower, but it's probably not the most optimized thing that you could do. I think you really want to be mindful on what you focus on before a game and manage that level of arousal. If you've done GCSE PE, you probably know all about the inverted U theory, about arousal and how performance generally is best in that sort of middle bit. If you're over aroused, you tend to not perform as well as you could do. Now, I feel like a lot of the things that we do as athletes is sympathetic stuff that amps us up, but not a lot of the stuff we do, relaxes us, the sort of parasympathetic stuff. So again, we want to be mindful about when we put ourselves in an aroused state. What I will do when I go to the game is take electrolytes and a fast-acting sugar. So I've got electrolytes, something called Element. Now, I don't necessarily think you need to spend a fortune on electrolytes like I do. Pretty much anything will work, but again, I would only use them as a tool. If you are sweating a lot, use the extra electrolytes. If you really do need, if you've done a lot of expenditure, then you can reach for the sugar. But again, I wouldn't suggest it. I don't think it's the most optimized you could be. Again, with the music, I try and stay away from it before the game because it can release noradrenaline and acetylcholine, and acetylcholine can't be reuptaken. So again, I just don't necessarily see the benefit unless it's just before you go out and play. When you get to the ground, I think that you should be practicing at a focal length you will be receiving in a game and similar lighting conditions. That's why I wouldn't just do throwdowns. Again, when you're doing throwdowns, you're probably not moving at the same pace, intensity, and range as you would be when you're facing a bowler. So wouldn't you prefer to find out when you're in the nets facing a bowler that you play a pull shot and actually you find you're a bit stiff in your T-spine or a bit stiff in your ankle? Isn't it best to find out then, before the warm-up, than during your first 10 or 15 balls? I would argue yes. Now, if you want to, work on finer motor skills, then do your throwdowns afterwards. But if you were batting for your life, in a one-time innings, you're probably going to do a net and then maybe throwdowns or something like that. I don't believe that many people in the world would say, actually, no, a net is worse for me than not doing it before a game, and facing bowlers is worse than, anything else. I saw research in the Journal of Experimental Psychology showed that baseball players that practiced with simulated pitch speeds and also distances had much better hitting outcomes than those that didn't. So again, I think if you extrapolated that to cricket, it would favor you having a net against bowlers similar to, the conditions you will face in a game. Now, I want to cite a bit more of an abstract piece of research. And this research was done on judges in 2011. Now, bear with me, it was done on over 10,000 judicial rulings, and it showed their conviction rates before lunch and after lunch. And it showed that there was a significant impact on human factors such as fatigue and hunger on decision making. If you think about when you eat breakfast on a game day, it might be 8 a.m. and the next time that you eat might be 1 p.m. and you might have covered 15 kilometers plus a warm-up during that period of time. Are you telling me that you're making your best decisions after that. These judges are meant to be as fair and as impartial as possible. It showed that the probability of a favourable ruling was 65% after lunch compared to nearly 0% before lunch. So what does that actually mean? Now, it shows that these judges, after eating and after resting, it actually restored the judges' cognitive resources and reduced decision fatigue. Now, how is that relevant for cricket? Well, cricket's a game of making consistent good decisions, and being hungry and tired leads to worse decisions. So in the world of cricket, where all the food options you get at a game is basically terrible, what should you be eating? Now, I would probably say something like, if you're in the field, a pocket full of unsalted cashew nuts would work really well. They're calorie dense, they don't go off, they're not going to ruin your pockets, and you're probably not going to get done for ball tampering with them. I feel during cricket there is a lot of dead time when somebody's chasing the ball to the boundary or in between overs, and I feel like when we're running and we're doing a lot of anterior chain-based things, you get a lot of stiffness, and that can lead to lower back pain. And there's something called reciprocal inhibition, where basically the quads will get tight and then the hamstrings and the glutes won't fire as well as they could do. Now, in that dead time, what I would do is I would mobilize the quads and engage the hamstrings and glutes. I find that I get a lot less lower back pain, my feet hurt a lot less, and therefore I'm more willing to be athletic because I've got more energy to do so. And it's just one less thing that you're worrying about and thinking about. So again, what I'll do when you get to lunch is I generally tend to take my own lunch. You know, lunch is always a bit of a lottery when you go to cricket, so I know it's completely controlled. I'm going to get exactly what I need. I take it out, it's just defrosting in the microwave, and I eat it there and then. Before you go out to bat, I see a lot of pros, you know, lying back, relaxing, some people even sleeping. But if you think about it, what's the chances that you can react at your absolute best to 90 miles an hour after basically being asleep? I would probably argue you are going to be a little bit off. And are you then in the same lighting conditions you are going to be in the game? Probably not. So I would always suggest that you should be sitting outside and you should be consistently mobilizing. Now, I know for pros you might be sitting down for 6 hours before you bat, but for club cricketers it's probably like 20 minutes. So I would get the blood flowing, I would be in lighting conditions that's going to simulate what I'm going to face in a game, I would be skipping, or I'd be doing quick feet movements, and I generally do it for one ball and over until I go in. If you wanted to be super nerdy and you are feeling a little bit lethargic, you could go for some form of sympathetic breathing, some form of hyperventilation style breathing where it's one quick inhale, one quick exhale for 30 breaths. I find you get a little bit buzzed. Now, I'm not saying you have to go full Wim Hof and you can be swimming around near the Titanic. No, you don't need to go that extreme. But I find that when I do it, plus I do the quick steps or the jumping or the hopping, you are a lot less lethargic. And you know, when you're a bit slow moving and the feet are moving slow in your first 10 to 15 balls, I find that I don't really get that as much. Again, if you wanted to be really nerdy and you wanted to try and help recover just a little bit better, when you do get out, if you do get out, I would take your socks off and then walk on the grass barefoot and do something called grounding. Again, there has been some decent research to show that does help you relax and recover, but it's pretty nerdy, and you know, I think it's something that probably works over a longer period of time. You're not going to see meaningful change, you know, in a few weeks. And then that's probably not a bad time to do some developmental stretching. These are a lot of the things that I have been doing over the last 6 years, and it does consistently evolve. I would say after a game, best practice is to have food. Don't get fooled by a first year S&C that says chocolate milk is the best thing to have. It doesn't have that much protein and it's high in fat. You don't need the fat. So if you really didn't want to eat the food, you could have a protein shake with something high in sugar that didn't have much fat. That would be better practice. I wouldn't recommend doing ice baths. I think we want to kickstart the inflammation process as it helps healing and recovery, because we're not doing multi-day events. If you were playing in a tournament or playing in a test match, then I would see some potential advantages for cold exposure. But even then, people decide that they want to go and, you know, sit in 2-degree water. Again, I'm not sure that's what the research says. I think it says 12 to 20 degrees for 15 minutes. That, I think, is better practice than freezing your nuts off for 3 minutes. Yes, releasing the noradrenaline will help sort of a little bit of the aches and pains, but I've just seen recent research to say that the effects of that cold exposure is a little bit overstated. Now this protocol is ever evolving with me, and it's based on anecdotal evidence and also what I see in the research. So I hope you find some value from any of this. If you try any of it and it works for you, please do let me know. But I'd also like to caveat this by saying if you are a professional cricketer, I feel like not all of this is best practice for you, or if you play tournaments, this isn't best practice for you. There's probably 50 to 60% changes I would make in order to tailor it so that it was best for you. Now you may wonder, if most of this is all research based, why pros don't do it. And I actually think in 25 years time, a lot of the stuff that I'm saying will become best practice at the international level. And if the player schedules are reduced and more money and statistics come into the game, more players might become sort of cricketing nomads and therefore are not affiliated with a county or a country. They're just free agents for all of the world tournaments. There will be more responsibility placed on them to curate their sort of performance infrastructure around them, similar to what we see in Formula One. And when the value of cricketers becomes more akin to the value of American sports stars, I feel like we will see fewer Rishabh Pants and Virender Sehwags and far more Virat Kohlis. In this case, seeing people like LeBron James and Cristiano Ronaldo's style of diligence won't become uncommon in the professional game.